13th tribe, the Khazar Empire, and its heritage. The circumstances of the conversion were obscured by legend, but the principal Arab and Hebrew accounts of it have some basic features in common. Al-Masudi's account of the Jewish rule in Khazaria, quoted earlier on, ends with a reference to a previous work of his, in which he gave a description of those circumstances. That previous work of Masudi's is lost, but there exist two accounts which are based on the lost book. The first, by Damaski, written in 1327, reiterates that at the time of Harun al-Rashid, the Byzantine emperor forced the Jews to immigrate. These immigrants came to Khazar country, where they found an intelligent but uneducated race to whom they offered their religion. The natives found it better than their own and accepted it. The second, much more detailed account is in Al-Braki's Book of Kingdoms and Roads, 11th century. The reason for the conversion to Judaism of the king of the Khazars, who had previously been a pagan, is as follows. He had adopted Christianity. Then he recognized its falsehood and discussed this matter, which greatly worried him, with one of his high officials. The latter said to him, "O king, those in possession of sacred scriptures fall into three groups. Summon them and ask them to state their case, then follow the one who is in possession of the truth." So he went to the Christians for a bishop. Now there was with the king a Jew, skilled in argument, who engaged him in disputation. He asked the bishop, "What do you say of Moses, the son of Amram, and the Torah which was revealed to him?" The bishop replied, "Moses is a prophet, and the Torah speaks the truth." Then the Jew said to the king, "He has already admitted the truth of my creed. Ask him now what he believes in." So the king asked him, and he replied, "I say that Jesus, the Messiah, is the son of Mary. He is the Word, and he has revealed the mysteries in the name of God." Then said the Jew to the king of the Khazars, "He preaches a doctrine which I know not, while he accepts my propositions." But the bishop was not strong in producing evidence. Then the king asked for a Muslim, and they sent him a scholarly, clever man who was good at arguments. But the Jew hired someone who poisoned him on the journey, and he died. And the Jew succeeded in winning the king for his faith, so that he embraced Judaism. The Arab historian certainly had a gift for sugaring the pill. Had the Muslim scholar been able to participate in the debate, he would have fallen into the same trap as the bishop, for both accepted the truth of the Old Testament, whereas the upholders of the New Testament and of the Quran were each outvoted 2-1. The king's approval of this reasoning is symbolic. He is only willing to accept doctrines which are shared by all three, their common denominator, and refuses to commit himself to any of the rival claims which go beyond that. It is, once more, the principle of the uncommitted world applied to theology. The story also implies, as Burry has pointed out, that Jewish influence at the Khazar court must already have been strong before the formal conversion, for the bishop and the Muslim scholar have to be sent for, whereas the Jew is already with him, the king. We now turn from the principal Arab source on the conversion, Masudi and his compilers, to the principal Jewish source. This is the so-called Khazar correspondence, an exchange of letters in Hebrew between Hasdai ibn Shaprut, the Jewish chief minister of the Caliph of Cordoba, and Joseph, king of the Khazars, or rather between their respective scribes. The authenticity of the correspondence has been the subject of controversy, but is now generally accepted, with due allowance made for the vagaries of later copyists. The exchange of letters apparently took place after 954 and before 961. That is roughly at the time when Masadi wrote. To appreciate its significance, a word must be said about the personality of Hasadi ibn Shaprut, perhaps the most brilliant figure in the Golden Age, 900 through 1200, of the Jews in Spain. In 929, Abd al-Rahman III, a member of the Umayyad dynasty, succeeded in unifying the Moorish possessions in the southern and central parts of the Iberian Peninsula under his rule, and founded the Western Caliphate. His capital, Cordoba, became the glory of Arab Spain and a focal center of European culture, with a library of 400,000 cataloged volumes. Hasadi, born in 910 in Cordoba into a distinguished Jewish family, first attracted Caliph's attention as a medical practitioner, with some remarkable cures to his credit. Abd al-Rahman appointed him his court physician and trusted his judgment so completely that Hasdai was called upon, first, to put the state finances in order, then to act as foreign minister and diplomatic troubleshooter in the new Caliphate's complex dealings with Byzantium, the German Emperor Otto, with Castile, Navarra, Aragon, and other Christian kingdoms in the north of Spain. Hasdai was a true homo universal centuries before the Renaissance, who, in between affairs of state, still found the time to translate medical books into Arabic, to correspond with the learned rabbis of Baghdad, and to act as a maison for Hebrew grammarians and poets. He obviously was an enlightened, yet a devoted Jew, who used his diplomatic contacts to gather information about the Jewish communities dispersed in various parts of the world, and to intervene on their behalf whenever possible. He was particularly concerned about the persecution of Jews in the Byzantine Empire under Romanius. Fortunately, he wielded considerable influence at the Byzantine court, which was vitally interested in procuring the benevolent neutrality of Cordoba during the Byzantine campaigns against the Muslims of the East. Hasadi, who was conducting the negotiations, used this opportunity to intercede on behalf of Byzantine Jewry, apparently with success. According to his own account, Hasadi first heard of the existence of an independent Jewish kingdom from some merchant traders from Khorasan in Persia, but he doubted the truth of their story. Later, he questioned the members of a Byzantine diplomatic mission to Cordoba, and they confirmed the merchant's account, contributing a considerable amount of factual detail about the Khazar kingdom, including the name Joseph of its present king. Thereupon, Hasadi decided to send couriers with a letter to King Joseph. The letter, which will be discussed in more detail later on, contains a list of questions about the Khazar state, its people, method of government, armed forces, and so on, including an inquiry to which of the 12 tribes Joseph belonged. This seems to indicate that Hasudi, through the Jewish Khazars, to hail from Palestine, as the Spanish Jews did, perhaps even to represent one of the lost tribes. Joseph, not being of Jewish descent, belonged, of course, to none of the tribes. In his reply to Hasudi, he provides, as we shall see, a genealogy of a different kind, but his main concern is to give Hasidi a detailed, if legendary, account of a conversion, which took place 2 centuries earlier, and the circumstances that led to it. Joseph's narrative starts with a eulogy of his ancestor, King Bulan, a great conqueror and a wise man who drove out the sorcerers and idolaters from his land. Subsequently, an angel appeared to King Bulan in his dreams, exhorting him to worship the only true God and promising that in exchange he would bless and multiply Bulan's offspring and deliver his enemies into his hands and make his kingdom last to the end of the world. This, of course, is inspired by the story of the covenant in Genesis, and it implies that the Khazars too claimed the status of a chosen race, who made their own covenant with the Lord, even though they were not descendant from Abraham's seed. But at this point, Joseph's story takes an unexpected turn. King Bulan is quite willing to serve the Almighty, but he raises a difficulty. Thou knowest, my lord, the secret thoughts of my heart, and thou hast searched my kidneys to confirm that my trust is in thee. But the people over which I rule have a pagan mind, and I do not know whether they will believe me. If I have found favor and mercy in thine eyes, then I beseech thee to appear also in their great prince, to make him support me. The Eternal One granted Bulan's request. He appeared to the prince in a dream, and when he arose, In the morning he came to the king and made it known to him. There is nothing in Genesis nor in the Arab accounts of the conversion about a great prince whose consent has to be obtained. It is an unmistakable reference to the Khazar's double kingship. The great prince, apparently, is the Bek. But it is not impossible that the king was the Bek and the prince the Kagan. Moreover, according to Arab and Armenian sources, the leader of the Khazar army which invaded Transcaucasia in 731, a few years before the presumed date of the conversion, was called Bolkhan. Joseph's letter continues by relating how the angel appeared once more to the dreaming king and bade him to build a place of worship in which the Lord may dwell. For the sky and the skies above the sky are not large enough to hold me. King Bulan replies bashfully that he does not possess the gold and silver required for such an enterprise, although it is my duty and my desire to carry it out. The angel reassures him. All Bulan has to do is to lead his armies into Dariella and Ardabil in Armenia, where a treasure of silver and a treasure of gold are awaiting him. This fits in with Bulan's or Bolkhan's raid, preceding the conversion, and also with Arab sources according to which the Khazars at one time controlled silver and gold mines in the Caucasus. Bulan does as the angel told him, returns victoriously with the loot, and builds a holy tabernacle equipped with a sacred coffer, the Ark of the Covenant, a candelabrum, an altar, and holy implements which have been preserved to this day and are still in my King Joseph's possession. Joseph's letter, written in the second half of the 10th century, more than 200 years after the events it purports to describe, is obviously a mixture of fact and legend. His description of the scant furnishings of the place of worship and the paucity of the preserved relics is a marked contrast in the account he gives in other parts of the letter of the present prosperity of his country. The days of his ancestor Bulan appeared to him as remote antiquity, when the poor but virtuous king did not even have the money to construct the holy tabernacle, which was, after all, only a tent. However, Joseph's letter, up to this point, is merely the prelude to the real drama of the conversation, which he now proceeds to relate. Apparently, Bulan's renunciation of idolatry in favor of the only true God was only the first step, which still left the choice open between the three monotheistic creeds. At least, this is what the continuation of Joseph's letter seems to imply. After these feats of arms, the invasion of Armenia, King Bulan's fame spread to all countries. The king of Edom, Byzantium, and the king of Ishmaelim, the Muslims, heard the news and sent to him envoys with precious gifts and money and learned men to convert him to their beliefs. But the king was wise and sent for a Jew with much knowledge and acumen and put all these three together to discuss their doctrines. So we have another brain trust or roundtable conference, just as in Masudi, with the difference that the Muslim has not been poisoned beforehand. But the pattern of the argument is much the same. After long and futile discussions, the king adjourns the meeting for 3 days, during which the discussants are left to cool their heels in their respective tents. Then he reverts to a stratagem. He invokes the discussants separately. He asks the Christian which of the other two religions is nearer the truth, and the Christian answers the Jews. He confronts the Muslim with the same question and gets the same reply. Neutralism has once more carried the day. So much for the conversion. What else do we learn from the celebrated Khazar correspondence? To take Hasudi's letter first, it starts with a Hebrew poem in the then fashionable manner of the Paiute, a rhapsodistic version form which contains hidden allusions or riddles, and frequently acrostics. The poem exalts the military victories of the addressee, King Joseph. At the same time, the initial letters of the lines form an acrostic which spells out the full name of Hasades bar Isaac bar Ezura bar Chaptertwo, followed by the name of Menahim ben Sharuk. Now, this Menahim was a celebrated Hebrew poet, lexicographer, and grammarian, a secretary and protege of Hasades. He was obviously given the task of drafting the episode to King Joseph in his most ornate style. And he took the opportunity to immortalize himself by inserting his own name into the acrostic after that of his patrons. Several other works of Menahim ben Sharuk are preserved, and there can be no doubt that Hasudi's letter is his handiwork. After the poem, the compliments and diplomatic flourishes, the letter gives a glowing account of the prosperity of Moorish Spain and the happy condition of the Jews under its Caliph Abd an-Raham, the like of which has never been known, and thus the derelict sheep were taken into care. The arms of their persecutors were paralyzed, and the yoke was discarded. The country we lived in is called in Hebrew Sephard, but the Ishmaelites who inhabit it call it Al-Andalas. Hasadi then proceeds to explain how he first heard about the existence of the Jewish kingdom from the merchants of Khorasan. Then, in more detail from the Byzantine envoys, and he reports what these envoys told him. I questioned them, the Byzantines, about it, and they replied that it was true, and that the name of the kingdom is Alcazar. Between Constantinople and this country, there is a journey of 15 days by sea. But they said, by land there are many other people between us and them. The name of the ruling king is Joseph. Ships come to us from their land, bringing fish, furs, and all sorts of merchandise. They are in alliance with us and honored by us. We exchange embassies and gifts. They are powerful and have a fortress for their outposts and troops which go out on forays from time to time. This bit of information offered by Hasudi to the Khazar king about the king's own country is obviously intended to draw a detailed reply from Joseph. It was good psychology. Hasudi must have known that criticism of erroneous statements flows easier from the pen than an original exposition. Next, Hasadi relates his earlier efforts to get in touch with Joseph. First, he had sent a messenger, a certain Isaac bar Nathan, with instructions to proceed to the Khazar court. But Isaac got only as far as Constantinople, where he was courteously treated, but prevented from continuing the journey. Understandably so, given the emperor's ambivalent attitudes towards the Jewish kingdom. It was certainly not in Constantine's interest to facilitate an alliance between Khazaria and the Cordoba Caliphate with its Jewish chief minister. So Hasadi's messenger returned to Spain. Mission unaccomplished. But soon another opportunity offered itself. The arrival at Cordoba of an embassy from Eastern Europe. Among its members were two Jews, Mar Saul and Mar Joseph, who offered to deliver Hasadi's letter to King Joseph. According to Joseph's reply to Hasadi, it was actually delivered by a third person, one Isaac ben Eliezer. Having thus described in detail how his letter came to be written and his efforts to have it delivered, Hasadi proceeds to ask a series of direct questions which reflect his avidity for more information about every aspect of the Khazar land, from its geography to its rites in observing the Sabbath. The concluding passage in Hasadi's letter strikes a note quite different from all of its opening paragraphs. I feel the urge to know the truth, whether there is really a place on this earth where harassed Israel can rule itself, where it is subject to nobody. If I were to know that this is indeed the case, I would not hesitate to forsake all honors, to resign my high office, to abandon my family, and to travel over mountains and plains, over land and water, until I arrived at the place where my Lord, the Jewish king, rules. And I also have one more request: to be informed whether you have any knowledge of the possible date of the final miracle, the coming of the Messiah, which, wandering from country to country, we are awaiting, dishonored and humiliated in our dispersion. We have to listen in silence to those who say, every nation has its own land, and you alone possess not even a shadow of a country on this earth. The beginning of the letter praises the happy lot of the Jews in Spain. The end breaches the bitterness of the exile. Zionist fever and messianic hope. But these opposite attitudes have always coexisted in the divided heart of Jews throughout their history. The contradictions in Hasudi's letter gives it an added touch of authenticity. How far his implied offer to enter into the service of the Khazar king is to be taken serious is another question, which we cannot answer. Perhaps he could not either.